Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Odd Vlog. And we've just had episodes 1, 2 and 3 of the new series of Bad Batch released on Disney+. So let's get into some theories and some ideas of the first few episodes. So episode 1 of the new series of Bad Batch basically starts with following Omega around in her new life, basically as a prisoner on a scientific base, being held captive by the Empire after the way that season 2 finished, where she got captured. And I have to say, it's very eerily similar and close to the story that's being told in The Mandalorian with Grogu. It's obviously that they're going down the route of cloning, we know that, and that the Empire and Palpatine are trying to kind of capture a Force-sensitive individual and use their midichlorian count to make Palpatine's clones Force-sensitive and enable them to survive if he were to transfer his essence over to them, which of course is what he's trying to do. By the time that the sequels come along, he's actually already done it. So you've kind of got the exact same parallels going on between Bad Batch and The Mandalorian. You have a potentially Force-sensitive individual. We know that Grogu is. We're not sure if Omega is, but we suspect that maybe she is. She's obviously different from any other clone. There's something special about her. And presumably it's the midichlorian count, and that's exactly why they want her blood and to be able to test and do all these things to try to create these Palpatine clones. So there's a lot of similarities between the two shows, which kind of makes you ask the question, well, why are they doing the kind of the same story? It begs the question, does that mean that they're just essentially unsuccessful by the time we get to the end of the Bad Batch? I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be the final season. So, you know, by the time we get to the end of this show, does that mean that maybe Omega doesn't survive? Or does it simply mean that whatever attempts the Empire are making to try to capture her, it just doesn't work out and she disappears off and they never find her? So now they start having to look for someone else, and that's eventually when they lead to Grogu. Or is it simply that Omega doesn't work and they need another Force-sensitive individual, or someone who's even more Force-sensitive or has an even higher midichlorian count? So they go with someone who is essentially a Jedi. So it's kind of, you know, they're telling the exact same story really, but it's kind of weird as to why you've got one that's set basically at the beginning of the Empire and one at the end, and they're still trying to do the exact same thing. So obviously, presumably it doesn't work, but it does by the end. So you're kind of sort of stuck in this limbo of why actually bother telling that story if A, it's already been done, or B, you know the outcome of it because you know it's not going to work, or C, it's just kind of mingled in somewhere along with everything else. And it's obvious that they're trying to push this clone of Palpatine storyline because then it ties in with the sequels and it kind of makes it all relevant and sort of brings it all under this one storyline, which suddenly becomes like the whole emphasis of the Empire, and that sort of timeline is that Palpatine's essentially just trying to make sure that he survives. So it's kind of a bit weird, but it's a bit sort of dull as a story because, yeah, we've already seen it. Grogu's already been that character and done what is essentially now what Omega is doing. So it's kind of, yeah, we've seen this story before. So episode 2 kind of carries on with that story, but for the first time actually kind of go back to the Bad Batch as such with Hunter and the team, although there is actually only just him and Wrecker at this point. And they're going off and basically trying to find her and find clues as to where she's been taken to, which is proving to be a particularly difficult enterprise. However, they do end up finding an older sort of Empire lab base on a planet where they get tipped off as to maybe that's where Omega is. And of course she's not there, but it's sort of abandoned and run over. But what is actually quite interesting about this episode is that they encounter a creature which is very much like the Drengir, I think that's how you pronounce it, Drengir, from the High Republic, which are eventually, basically they're a creature which is, if you imagine like a living plant, and it's got a lot of vines and all this kind of thing, and a great big kind of like carnivorous mouth devouring everything. And that's essentially what they come up against in that episode, in episode 2 of the Bad Batch. And it is very eerily similar to what you imagine the Drengir would be like out of the High Republic books. It's got the same physical appearance, these vines that spread and kind of just go everywhere, and they have a bit of a life of their own, but they're all connected and they're all hive-minded to bigger versions of the same creature that have these huge, great big, you know, gnashing teeth and huge mouths to try to eat everything. It's interesting because those creatures are mildly force sensitive. They can actually connect up with force sensitive individuals, give them visions, hallucinations and things like that. So it's the idea that maybe there's just this slight connection as to, okay, well, maybe they're not able to progress the Palpatine clones properly using conventional methods of cloning. Obviously, maybe at the point that they had that lab, they hadn't yet been able to capture Omega, and obviously Grogu hasn't happened yet. So it could be that they're using the Drengir as an opportunity to try to test out and to sort of experiment with whether or not there's something in that species that enables them to create force-sensitive Palpatine clones that survive. Because they do have that just ever so slightly bit of sort of force sensitivity that we read about in the books. And what's weird about it is that they sort of say in that episode that those creatures were created by the Empire and by their sort of scientists and things to try to get to you know, a point where they can create these clones successfully. And maybe they're just trying to, you know, use that species as a means to try and progress that in the absence of anything better. But they don't actually create the Drengir. The Drengir already existed. They've been around for thousands of years. So it's just a bit bizarre. So we don't know for certain whether it's actually them, but it was just a very interesting and very, very comparable looking species that was there. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it as to why they may have actually been intentionally experimenting on them. So it was just a bit of an interesting kind of potential Easter egg. It's not confirmed, but it was certainly something that I picked up on. Episode 3 then starts to get a little bit more interesting because we finally actually get to see Omega and Crosshair actually escaping out of the base that they're being contained in. And they do escape, they do get out, so that's obviously a great thing for those characters. And Hunter and Wrecker are still out there trying to find them. But it's kind of too little too late because by the time that they do, we actually kind of see Omega's tests and her blood results and all this kind of thing. They've essentially discovered that they found what they're looking for in her. So they need to recapture her. And that's obviously where the rest of the series is going to go. And that's going to be the kind of storyline going forward for the rest of the season. It kind of makes sense. And they've built it up quite heavily in that way. But, you know, they've essentially managed to find what they needed to find from her. She is going to be this potential individual that's going to enable their cloning experiments to continue for the Emperor, which is definitely confirmed because Project Necromancer is referenced in that episode by word, and also the Emperor is there actually at that base sort of getting the latest as to what's been going on with all their experiments and what they found out so far. And although you don't see them, there are what I imagine to be, there's like these tanks that you see, and although you don't see what's inside them because they're all kind of sealed shut, it's presumably clones that, you know, maybe aren't quite working out yet, or that they're still working on and that they're still testing with. And obviously Palpatine is saying that, you know, this is a priority, it needs to be sorted out. So, you know, he knows that his demise is coming. This is before episode 4, so he knows eventually there's going to be a time when he needs his own clone to be able to transfer to, and it needs to be able to survive. So, you know, they're obviously going down that road. It's all about the cloning, and it's the same story when it comes to episodes of The Mandalorian. They're doing the exact same thing. The Mandalorian kind of did it slightly different at the end of their last season 3 because it became more about clones of Moff Gideon as opposed to the Emperor, which was a bit strange. But, you know, ultimately it's the same kind of overreaching story arc that they're going for, which is obviously then trying to make the sequel trilogy that bit more relevant. The idea that that Snoke was a failed clone, and it then led to an eventual working, operating Palpatine clone, although it was failing and then needed to transfer essence again to Rey. So it becomes obviously part of this linear storytelling, which is absolutely fine. It makes the sequels that bit more relevant, or in particular The Rise of Skywalker, to kind of justify that storyline and bringing Palpatine back as being the bad guy in that film. So, you know, they're obviously trying to use Bad Batch and Mandalorian as a way to kind of connect all of that up and make it relevant and make it interesting, which is absolutely fine. It's obviously the direction that they feel they need to go down with Star Wars, to tell that story and kind of keep it all wrapped up under this one kind of linear storytelling thing, which is absolutely fine. And I do think it works. You know, essence transfer isn't a new thing. It's been written about and spoken about before. It's just that we've never actually seen it up until Disney have kind of taken over with the sequels and putting in these shows as well. So it's obviously where they're going down in terms of storytelling. Whether or not these things come up when we get the new slate of movies coming through, we don't know. We've got the sequel to episode 9, I think, is being filmed or starting to be filmed later on this year. So that will come out, over the next coming years. Whether or not they progress that story any further, I don't know, but I doubt that they will. I don't think that they will, because obviously that's supposed to have finished in episode 9. So the next movie that's coming out with Rey won't be in episode 10. It will be a whole brand new kind of thing. And then we're supposed to be getting this Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which could be ultimately when perhaps these Palpatine clones actually start to come to fruition, potentially. And then the other film that they're supposed to be making is set sort of like 10,000 years before episode 1 and the very, very beginnings of the Force and the Jedi and what have you. So it's a very different kind of interesting storylines that they can go down with those. But that's a topic for another day. So first 3 episodes of The Bad Batch, yeah, very good. I kind of felt like episode 2 was a little bit kind of boring. Didn't really hold my attention particularly well, but episode 3 certainly did. We got some much more kind of better action, and Palpatine in it. He has a presence in this show. It just really works. I swear they turn the volume up on his voice when he speaks over and above everybody else, so that there's just a lot more power in the sound of his voice and the way that he speaks. So yeah, his presence obviously was quite dramatic in that episode, and it's going to set up the rest of the season really, really well. So that being said, it's not a disappointment. It is actually a really good show. I really enjoy it. I do think that it's right to finish this after 3 seasons, though. You don't need to drag it out anymore. Arguably, I'm surprised that they actually got 3 seasons out of it, because it was only supposed to be a one-off thing many, many years ago. So there we go. It is quite good. I do think it's worth watching. It's very enjoyable, but it's just a bit of fun ultimately. So, but it'll be interesting to see kind of where they go down this road of, the whole cloning thing and how the series will finish. So with that said, we'll do another review of some of the more upcoming episodes after that, so 4, 5 and 6, in a future episode. So in the meantime, go and watch The Bad Batch episodes 1 to 3 of season 3. And with that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.